Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of Light Bytes. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it as always. If you are new to Light Bytes, thank you very much for joining us. Light Bytes is something that happens once a month. It's a regular event. We get together, and now that we've come out of, or we are coming out of the pandemic, we're actually back to in-person events. They were largely online for the past couple of years. But we're super excited to start having a bit of a studio audience back with us again. Hey, studio audience. Hey, there we go. So do come down for the next one. First Thursday of every month. We're back here. Every month, new topic, new guests joining us on the panel, and it's really great to have you here. So without any more delay, I'm really super excited to have Fabian with us here tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. And welcome. Fabian, I'll let you do a bit more a little about you, but you are a cinematographer whose work we've all seen in Game of Thrones and a number of other films, some of Marvel stuff, DC's movies, really, really exciting, big, epic productions. Not Marvel, just DC. Batman and co. We're really excited to have you here with us. So thank you very much, and welcome for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you. How did you get started? How did you end up where you are doing what you do?
Well, I'm German originally. I think I probably knew very early on that I would like to become a cinematographer. So I was probably about 14 when I started working child labor with 14, I guess. I started shooting things with 14. I took lots of pictures, developing pictures, and then sort of went from there, shooting short films, started working on short films for the film school early on with like 16, 17, and then just went from there, and then went to film school myself once I finished high school, and then was working in various departments for a couple of years, became a loader, focus puller, operator pretty quickly, and then moved to the UK, did my master's, and started working here.
Amazing, brilliant. So, being a cinematographer, you have obviously a huge amount of responsibility because you're responsible for not only the lighting, but also sort of camera choices, lens choices, film choices, all that sort of stuff. Where do you start in that process? Let's pick something like Game of Thrones. Someone picks up the phone and says, great, we'd love you to do this. What's your sort of process into that?
None. Because that's easy, because I came on later in the show, so I came on season 4, by which time everything is kind of set. So they have a certain, by season 4, everything is established. They've established a camera package, they've established a lens package, and when you come in at that stage and when everything has been going well, it's very hard to change things. I've tried a few times. But so when you come into a show like this, it's pretty easy. There isn't any of these other issues you have to deal with. It's when you start something off from scratch, that's when, the discussions about which cameras, sensors, lenses, the look and everything.
Okay, and starting from scratch, do you have a sort of base package that you sort of go to, or do you tend to look at each project as its own unique entity and sort of develop from there?
Yeah, no, I mean, not anymore. I think I used to have, I think you sort of go through stages in your career where it's an experience thing, I think. When you're very inexperienced, things can throw you, so sometimes it's nice to sort of fall back onto something that you've used before and it's working, and so you just sort of fall into it again, which I certainly have done. I mean, it's also, it's your own sort of personal thing, but then it's also what's, coming to you from the outside. So for example, when I started doing TV shows in the UK in sort of early 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, 8, at that time the Cooke S4s were the sort of go-to lens for any TV production,
right?
I think, at that time. And so, I sometimes started off a show and probably thinking, oh, I should try something else, but because that was the thing that we've used and everybody was using it, you kind of went like, okay, I'll take that. But then, and sometimes you fall into things. So it's a combination of all of that. But then very quickly, I think I kind of got into a mode of thinking that I actually want to try different things. And I purposefully make myself choose. I mean, it's great because every project's different. So you have the freedom and you can, to find the right lens, the right camera, the right look for each project. But also I love trying out new things now and, just to keep you on your toes and to make it different and learn about different things.
So how much time do you have to experiment going before you actually sort of arrive on set? Do you have opportunity to try some cameras and try some lenses and try some lights? What's that sort of process like before you actually arrive on set to shoot?
Yeah. I mean, it always depends on the project. Obviously, it depends on the budget. It depends on the size of the film or show. The bigger the film, the more time you have. But so it's hard to sort of generalize that. But you always have time to sort of look at the things that you want to look at. I think no matter how, I've always had the time. I've always been given the time. Whether it's a day, or whether it's 3 or 4 days. You kind of. As soon as you do a project and you read the script or you know what it's about, you have a certain idea of what could work. So it's not like I'm testing every single lens that's out there. Think, oh, this might work, this might work, this might work. So let's test those 3 sets. You don't need that much time. But obviously, it's always nice to have time to do things precisely. But
and as part of your pre-production process, to what extent are you involved with the other creative departments? Because coming largely from a theatrical background, obviously, we're involved with the set designers, the costume designers, the directors have a huge amount of input in terms of the overall look and feel. How much of that falls onto you? How much involvement is there with the other departments?
Yeah, I mean, a huge amount, I think. I mean, obviously, when I join a project, it's the director and the production designer on board. They spend a lot of time together talking about the project and the way it could look. So you join into that conversation. So the production designer is a huge source of inspiration, but also communication and developing the look with them and the director is super important. And then the further it goes, the more you talk to all the other departments, makeup, costume, all of that. It only works if you work as one, so to say. So, and I love that collaboration with all the departments, from costume to visual effects to special effects, all of it,
Yeah.
And I think the more you do that prior, the more, because you always run into problems on film shoots. So the more you have done these things prior, you still run into problems, but less.
Sure. At least it's something you're almost anticipating, perhaps makes it
for
a
sure,
little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have? Is there a? Because a lot of the stuff, and I would assume, I mean, Game of Thrones or any of the sort of fantasy world stuff, they're created in worlds that are their own and that are unique. How do you sort of set a palette for each world? Is it a color choice? Is it an intensity choice? How do you sort of style your worlds as you sort of building those looks?
Well, obviously, the main influence comes from the director, because that's what you're essentially there for, is to kind of create that vision. But like I said, it's a combination of everyone working together. So if you're shooting something that's entirely or very visual effects heavy, like Justice League, where a lot of it was based. Was going to end up as visual effects. You have to really talk to the visual effects department, to the visual effects supervisor, go through the designs with the director, with the supervisor, go through your lighting ideas to sort of blend them together as much as possible. And that's a process I really enjoy. I actually enjoy that process a lot. I've been sort of ended up doing a lot of visual effects for some reason, which I've never worked towards that, but it's just sort of happened that way. But it's something I actually really enjoy, and to be standing on a stage which is entirely green, and you have that certain idea in your head of how you want to light it, and you have to work with the visual effects department to achieve that, and you have to know while you're shooting it what it's going to look like, and something I never thought I would enjoy, but it's something I do really enjoy.
So how do you manage that? Because on big green screen sets, obviously there has to be a fair amount of light at the green screen itself, because you need to get that information into the camera so you've got something to key off. But at the same time, you need to be able to have that sort of single shaft of light that comes down to sort of light. How are you managing that? What's your sort of, how do you set things up to deal with that? Because it feels like those two elements are sort of fighting with each other.
No, that's pretty easy these days. I mean, the cameras have become so good, you know. That isn't really an issue anymore. And the softwares have become so good for visual effects with green screen and keying. I mean, it's not like it used to be. You know, so that's not really an issue anymore. And if you have the space, if you can separate your action from the background, but it obviously means you need a larger space. So, but no, that's pretty straightforward.
Okay. And when you're on set and you're shooting against green screen, do you have any sort of real-time references of what the final image is going to look like? So are you seeing any sort of final image, or are you just relying on your instinct and your conversations with people to sort of know where you're going to end up?
I mean, technology is incredible these days, and there is all that technology out there. So I've been on sets where we had the possibility to actually look at, you can see, obviously not the final image, but it gives you a sort of sense of what it is. For me, it's not something that I particularly like. I actually like it more to all happen in my head. On the last season of Thrones, we had a 3D models of everything, so we could actually with VR, we could actually go into the virtual sets and look at potential angles and see what works, and which was great from a point of view where for the art department, it kind of shows you, okay, if I want to put my camera down here on a 14mm, how high do you have to build the physical set to make that work? And from when on can it be virtual? And it's just something I never really got into. A couple of the other DPs loved it, and they spent days in the virtual world sort of figuring out their angles and everything. And I think it's great, but it wasn't something for me. So I like the more that goes on up there, the better.
Fair
for
enough.
Me.
Do you have, as I'm sure most people who work in this business, is there a particular fixture that you use, that you favor? Is there something that you really like the quality of? Is there something that is pretty much guaranteed to always be on a shoot with you somewhere?
From a light?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to say tungsten light is my favorite light, and it has always been my favorite light, and still is. Obviously, the LEDs have become super, flexible, because they're so flexible and it's so easy to change color temperatures and everything. So it's something that we use a lot, obviously. But I have to still say that up to now, and I'm sure that's going to change at some point in the future, and having seen those today, I know it's in a good way, but up to now I've always been using tungsten mainly for actors and for faces, and it's a light that I love,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and it works, and
yeah,
I know it very well. So
you can do things with tungsten that we haven't yet been able to do before. For anyone who is watching online, those that we were referring to is our Series 3 and Phosphor LED panels. So just a little quick product plug there while we're going out live on the air. Color choice wise, obviously you like working in tungsten, so color temperature wise, you're in that sort of 3200 sort of world. In terms of filtering and stuff, have you got any particular colors that you sort of go to? Is it a sort of gut instinct for what you're doing?
Yeah, it's always a gut instinct for what you're doing, and it always changes, it always varies.
So if you are planning for your shoot, how do you sort of manage that? Because obviously there has to be a stock of color living in a van or in the back of a truck somewhere. Have you got is that a standard thing that just arrives on set, that there's the filter truck that lives, or do you sort of go, right, I'm probably going to need some of these, and some of these?
It's a combination. I mean, luckily on the films that I've been doing and the shows, because they're fairly big budget, there's a great selection of gels that we carry with us pretty much all the time. And then, but obviously, anything special, that's something I would look at in the prep time when I'm testing cameras, lenses, or looks or whatever, is where I would test certain colors, I would throw them in at that point and see. And then we would get a few of those.
And so prep work done, arrive, on set to start shooting. How big is a team on something like Game of Thrones? What is your lighting team looking like? What's their sort of makeup?
I mean, I think that the actual team itself was pretty small. We had obviously a gaffer and then probably 4 or 5 floor sparks. Or gaffer, best boy. But then you have the rigging gaffer with their crew. We had that twice, obviously, because we were shooting 2 crews simultaneously. So you have 2 gaffers, 5 floor sparks, each best boys, rigging gaffers plus their team. And then you've got all the dailies. And because Thrones, I mean, some of it very much depends on the episode. Sometimes you do an episode which is very much studio based, and it's all dialogue heavy, and you're just shooting in a few rooms, where everything is pretty straightforward and simple. Or you shoot the Dark episode, season 8, episode 3, and I think we must have had, I don't know, 40 extra sparks every day,
right?
On top of what we have. I don't know, maybe that's even not enough. I don't know. So it becomes huge. It goes from a very standard size to something insane.
And I suppose the same question, the next question is probably going to have the same kind of answer. In terms of your sort of setup time, from like what's your average sort of shooting day from sort of arriving on set to getting set up, rigged, focused, lit, and then into sort of shooting?
Again, very much depends on the film. I mean, I come from very low budget filmmaking. So, I'm very much used to sort of turning up and within 10 minutes you're off and you go. But then you do a bigger film and, you have a huge set and you have 2-3 hours before you start anything. So it's just very much, it very much depends. I love doing stuff. I love shooting. I hate sort of waiting around. So I always try and be quick, as quick as I can be.
And stuff generally tends to shoot out of sequence, right? You don't shoot, generally speaking, you don't sort of, as you would a play, you don't start at the beginning and sort of work through. There tends to be a lot of sort of jumping around. Who manages the recording of that from a paperwork point of view? Because obviously if you're on set A one day and you might not come back to that set for the next season or several other episodes, but obviously the look has to be consistent, the feel has to be consistent. Who does that fall onto to capture that information, to record that information?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of loads of people. Obviously, it used to be probably script continuity, who used to, take all the info of what the camera settings were, everything. I mean, back in the old days, I asked the gaffer to just make a note of what we use where, draw a little plan of where the, nowadays you've got the desktops and they've all got their 3D plans of whatever the set is like, and they just bring it up within a second. and you get everything to perfection, the levels of each lamp and for each scene number, and it's pretty insane. I mean, and on Thrones, we had on top of that, we had a system that was called something, I've actually forgot the name, but we were given iPads, and we had it showed stills images of every single scene that everybody had shot. So if I, for example, was shooting episode 4 in the throne room, and then someone else came in the throne room on episode 5 to continue that scene, they could just look at my stills and sort of had an idea straight away of what, if they want to change it or keep it, or, so yeah, it's a lot of people keeping track of things.
Yeah, because I would imagine across something like a Thrones, there must be thousands of images and documents and records of each scene and shot and location.
Yeah, absolutely, there was. And obviously, sometimes you shoot something on, the 10th of January, and then you go back in the same set, on the 15th of August. So there's a lot of time in between.
Yeah, but then surely you're dealing with seasonal affectation as well, because your light quality from a 6 months ago shoot to where you are then has changed. So how much are you then compensating for that? Or I suppose narratively, if the story's moved on, then that's, I guess, ties in. But how much of that factors into your initial planning, or is it something that you just turn up and deal
I think
with?
it's something you just go with. Unless it's a huge difference, you would change a lamp, but really, it's just something you just go with. There isn't really time for that. It's a big show, lots of money, but there's still not enough time.
Still never time.
To look into that detail.
Okay. One of the questions we had come through is how much time do you get between shots to sort of turn things around? But it wasn't more specific than that, so you can take specific instances from a Thrones or from a Justice League or something like that.
I mean, like I said, I like to be really as quick as I can be anyway, but I mean, you just don't get much time. It's very hard to sort of say exactly how much time, but I remember when I was doing my first film, I'd done like lots of TV for years and years and years, and I got used to the sort of very quick pacing of shooting TV, and I got my first film for, I think, 20th Century Fox, and it was fairly decent budget of like 40 million or something, and I thought to myself, this is great, it's more money, I'm going to have some time to have a bit more time to light in between, and I was like, fuck me, we're shooting like crazy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is just insane. So that was my first experience thinking I might have a bit more time. So I've never gone back to that train of thought after. So I like to keep that quick. But yeah, I mean, when you do Justice League and obviously you have big stars on the set, you do take more time to do that. But again, there's moments where you just turn around very quickly and.
So, on something like a Justice League, where I would assume a fair amount of it was on a green set, because there's a lot of sort of...
All of it.
All of it, okay. That's a fair amount, yeah, fine. So you're in this room, how much of stuff is permanently rigged and how much are you sort of chopping and changing daily? I mean, do you get a chance to go and put a rig? Is there a rig that exists that you put in for the shoot, or are you setting up each shot as you go?
No, so that I mean, we had something like 8 stages at Warner Brothers, and beforehand what you'd shoot in there. So I know in this stage I'm shooting the Batcave, and then later on it changes to something else. So I'm going to put in a rig that works for especially that. And also because you have time in between, because for them to take the Batcave out and put something else in will take a month. So you have time for the lighting to change as well. So you can be very specific on that. But if you do a show that's obviously less budget with much less shooting days, you'd have to be more sort of general, but you'd always try and put a rig in that will sort of serve as much of it as possible.
I just need to say, because I don't know if anyone else agrees, but that was a really cool thing to be able to say, right? When we were shooting in the Bat Cave, I just want I would love to be able to say that I was shooting in the Bat Cave. So that's very cool. We've had another question come in on the chat. Do you find that you use a lot of moving lights or intelligent fixtures in what you're doing, or is it still fairly conventional?
I've started using a lot more moving lights actually on Justice League, and then in the recent years, yeah. And I find it really interesting. So I would say now, and obviously it depends on the project, but it wouldn't work so well for something like Game of Thrones as much. But there have been occasions where I've used them for the background, for example, to create a certain pattern or something on a wall. But yeah, no, I find it really interesting, and I think the combination of conventional and moving lights works really well.
Okay, and just to stay in moving light world for a little bit, is that a choice? So if you're speccing moving lights, are you looking for them for their sort of gobo capabilities and things like that, or is it a color? Is it a light quality? What are your sort of choices for that?
Again, it depends. But I mean, for Justice League, we were doing a lot of underwater, but not underwater. So I was looking for a moving light that gives me a bit of an underwater quality to it. So I was doing lots of tests with various moving lights. The color is something that I then did separately with gels. So for that particular thing, it was mainly about the movement. But obviously, things are moving on so much. I mean, there's probably now a light out that can do the movement, but also has all the colors. But we didn't have that 6 years ago. So.
Fair enough. Do you remember which fixture you ended up using for the water effects?
It was a combination. It was Bad Boys, I think. Quite a few of them, but there was other stuff too. I can't remember.
Right. So it's always felt to me as an outsider to the industry that everything on film sets tends to be at a much bigger scale. So, on stage we'll have a 500 watt Fresnel and a 1K Fresnel, and if you're lucky a 2K Fresnel, then you're going to arrive on a scene on a film set, and there are these lovely 5, 10, 15, 20K Fresnels, sort of beautiful things. How you find it, because obviously, and I know a lot of that is legacy stuff from the cameras needing that amount of light. Have you seen a shift in the reduction of light levels on set with improvement of camera technology? Is it would you rather have more light and dim it down, or are you finding you using smaller fixtures now? Has there been a shift for you in terms of that approach?
Not at all for me personally, and I don't see a shift anywhere. I mean, personally, to me, I love the bigger the light, the better. Not because I need that much light, but because I always try and keep things away from the set as much as possible. I try and light things naturally. So for me, light has to come from a certain origin. So whether it's the sun or a window or the moon, it comes from somewhere. So if I'm shooting on a set, I tend to do everything through a window, for example, or through natural spaces that the light would come from. And so for me, having a larger light is much more helpful because. And also nowadays, there's a lot of softening the light off. So, I mean, I would put a light. I have a 20K and I would put it through maybe 2 or 3 diffusion frames if that's what the scene calls for. So, you naturally need a bigger light to sort of still get some light through at the end of it.
Fair enough.
So there's a reduction in light, but not a reduction in size.
But fair enough. There seems to be a shift, maybe not away from green screen, but as an alternative to green screen, where people are shooting with LED volume. Mm-hmm. Do you do much of that, first of all? And do you need to do anything differently from a lighting point of view if you're shooting an LED volume versus green screen?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I've just spent 4 months in there for the first time of my life. Last year, 4 months in the volume, and it was it was very strange to begin with, but it's like everything. You sort of spend some time in there, and you sort of get your head around it, and you evolve and things evolve while you're shooting it. It's a completely different system and the way it works. It's amazing, I have to say. It took me a long time to sort of get used to it and to eventually, I think, shoot something that I was actually fairly happy with. I think it will take a lot more shooting of that to sort of perfect it more, for me personally. But it was interesting. I did approach it slightly like I would approach any set. And then you sort of learn things and you add things from the actual volume technology to what you're doing. So I ended up having, for me, it was like a combination of things. I was at the end, I think, once I got my head around it, it was a combination of using the volume capabilities to a certain extent, but also still relying on sort of the old school classic film lighting. And I think that for me, that combination at the end worked fairly well. But it's definitely something I would love to do more of and sort of.
Because it's introduced a whole new light source, really, because all of a sudden your scenery in your background is chucking a whole lot of light at you that it wouldn't normally do. Did you find you had to, were you rebalancing levels to compensate?
Oh yeah, all of that. I mean, like I said, it was a huge learning curve, and you know, it went from. I mean, after the first couple of weeks, I thought this is terrible. You know, why are we doing this? And then at the end, I thought maybe okay, this is all right, could work.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I'm not sure yet.
Fair enough.
It's kind of sad because, you know, that you can tell that it's going to work perfectly fine in a couple of years, maybe 3-4 years. It just means it's the end of us going to nice places. Because everything that we shoot is going to be shot
in
next door.
Yeah, in a dark studio.
Not that it's not a nice place here, but.
So you mentioned that you get to go to some amazing places. What are some of the most memorable locations that you've shot in?
Yeah, I shouldn't say nice places for me is not the right word really. It's interesting. You just get to see some stuff that's not, you know. You get to see a few bits that you wouldn't get to see if you were just trying to get. I mean, we were shooting in the car. I can't remember the name of the castle for The Crown, and I'll just never forget that. But we were shooting in this castle, and obviously, you know, you normally can't get into that place. And we were on the recce, and I really need a wee. And I said to the security guard, I really need a wee. Is there anywhere, or not a security guard, it was a lady who was actually showing us around. And she goes, well, you know, you shouldn't really go in there, but just go in there. Because I was really desperate. And I went in there, and there was this tiny toilet. Anyway, I had a wee, and I came back out, and she goes, this is, I don't know, it was Queen Victoria's toilet. It hadn't been used in a long time. And so it was just so weird. And you think, okay, it's a different experience, you know, to the normal. And that happens all the time, going for a wee in strange places.
Light Bytes has taken a turn. Good. And shooting on location obviously comes with its own challenges. Has there been one location that was perhaps the most difficult in terms of getting gear, getting power?
So for me personally, no location is difficult because I don't do anything. It's difficult for all the other guys, for all my assistants and for the sparks. So if they have to run, you know, 3-phase down somewhere where you can't get to, it's terrible. And they have a super hard job, and we've had some terrible locations. I would never call it difficult because it's not. But yeah, certainly there's challenging locations, you know. But then the film world is so crazy that you just you almost kind of get used to things. You know, we were shooting in Iceland, and they wanted to shoot in an area that was never shot in before, for whatever reason. And it looked amazing where we were, but it was the most inaccessible place that you could think of. And to actually make it feasible, they put in a road. So we, for this particular film, we put in a road to get the trucks there, but you couldn't just get the trucks there, so you had to fly to Reykjavik, then you had to helicopter the stuff from Reykjavik to that specific place because you couldn't fly there with the normal plane. Then I had to put a road in to drive it from the landing place of the helicopter to that spot. And I don't know, when you sort of look at it, you think this is just insane. And so when you've seen stuff like that, it just almost becomes normal, which is really sad, you know. So, but yeah, there's stuff like that. I mean, we were shooting up on a cliff that you could only get to by helicopter, and so we spent, for one film, I spent 7 days in Iceland, but we were only shooting for 1 day,
right,
because it took them 5 days to helicopter the techno crane and everything else up there. You know, and you think that's just insane.
Yeah. Okay. And is there, or what are the differences, would you say, in lighting something for TV versus lighting something for a cinema release? Is there a huge
Nothing,
difference?
I think, anymore.
No? So,
I mean, not to me. I'm sure, you know, everybody's different. Everybody has their own opinions. To me, I've never approached it any other way. To me, it's always been the same. I always try to approach everything the same way, whether it's a TV show or a film, small or big. I try and approach everything in the same way. Obviously, adjusting to the budget and everything.
Sure.
But I try and approach it the same. I don't think there's much difference anymore. I think if you look at all of the TV stuff that's out these days, you know, it's on par with anything that's in the cinema.
Great. So we've got some images that you've sent across to us. Do you want to sort of talk us through where we are, what the film was, what we sort of...
Oh, so that's Battle of the Bastards. That was Battle of the Bastards for Game of Thrones. That's Miguel Sapochnik there, my director, and who's also become a good friend of mine.
And is that sort of mistiness in the background? I assume that was actual shooting conditions.
That was Ireland at its best. Yes.
So
10 minutes later it was sunny.
Right.
And half an hour later than that it was raining, I think.
So how much of that impacts on what you're doing? Because if you were relying on the sunshine and then it's mist, do you hold off? Do you wait? Do you capture some stuff that you can perhaps use at a later time? Is that how? I mean, I know weather's almost impossible to manage on location, but how much of that do you find you're able to sort of roll with and deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I've stopped worrying a long time ago. When this happened, I stopped worrying. No, there's nothing you can do with the weather. And I mean, we had a running joke on that. We were shooting this for 17 days, I think, this battle. And Northern Ireland, February, March, April, I mean, you have everything. We had rain, wind, snow, sun, everything in one day. I mean, there's just nothing you can do. So you try your best to sort of keep a consistency. The better relationship you have with the director, the more you can influence it, because I can plan with the director in the first, you know, let's shoot this, you know, I can plan it a little bit. If it's sunny, so I can make my schedule to how the sun would be if it was sunny, and I know that what doesn't screw me completely. But obviously there's always, it's, you know, there's just, if you worry about that, you've lost, you know. And if you look at that, I mean, I've learned from that sequence. We had this running joke because I was on the radio constantly saying, shoot now, shoot now. And I said, go, go, go. And then I said, no, 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 if it changed. And so it was constantly, I just said, go, go, go. No, no, no. That was the running joke throughout the whole 17 days. And it kind of worked. But if you look at it closely, if you stop every frame, it cuts from cloudy to sunny to rainy to sunny to cloudy to snow. In the end, what I've learned is that if you have a good sequence that works because you're engaged in it, it doesn't really matter. It's a battle sequence, so it's very fast cut, so it doesn't matter either. If you have a slow conversation between two people that's slowly edited, then it becomes more tricky because it's more obvious. But for that, it is what it is.
Oh, good old bat signal.
Yeah, that was cool. That was cool. Yeah. That was a cool day.
Is this so? In terms of what's happening in the background, is that an image from the shot? So all of the sort of turquoise and stuff that's washing in is stuff that you've laid in, or is a lot of that?
Yeah, no, that was all the way it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how much once you've shot stuff and it goes into post, how much are you then still involved in that process? Because obviously you've got a certain look and feel in your mind, and how much are you involved in post production to sort of maintain what you've created?
I mean, you want to be there as much as you can. You know, the problem is with the color grade is that a lot of the times, because it happens 6 months on the line, when that happens, you're on a different job, you can't attend. You know, I've had some bad experiences in the past where I wasn't able to attend. And it's kind of devastating because you try and do your best work, you put a lot of effort into it when you're shooting, and you have a very clear idea of what you want and how it should look, and then someone else changes that completely 6 months on the line. And it happened to me on a very small job years ago with Sean Bean called The Accused, and it was Sean Bean was playing a transvestite, and it was just the most amazing kind of role for him, because you would not imagine Sean to play a woman. And we had the nicest shoot we had. And I still feel like today that was probably the best thing I've ever done. It was super small budget, 12 days or 18 days maybe. And we had such a great time, and I had such a clear idea, and everything that we did on set everybody was so happy with that. And I couldn't attend the grade, and I never watched any of my stuff, so when a friend of mine texted me saying, when it came out, saying, what's this? And so I looked at it and I could not believe it. And it was the total opposite to what we had done on set and to what it was intended to be like. And that still annoys me, hurts me today, because it was such a perfect little film. And we had such a great time. And it was just, yeah. So, but it happens, I guess, and it happens to a lot of people. And so I try and always, I speak a lot with post-production when I'm finished. So I would always stay in touch with the visual effects supervisor, the editor, and always sort of say, look, I'm around. If there's anything, I'm around. Just to have I like having those relationships, and I think it's good. So yeah. I try and be there as much as I can, but sometimes things are not in your control. So
this looks like one of those trickier locations.
That was the one day.
Was that the shoot?
One I saw, yeah. And I was so hungover as well.
What production was that?
That was on Justice League.
Was that Justice League?
That was season 8 of Thrones.
So, what have you got sort of rigged up on the on the towers in the back there?
It's actually full Wendy's. I think we had 4 full Wendy's there, because that's the scene when the dragon sort of breaks through the gate and sort of spews fire. So we had a fire effect. So
particularly the last season of Thrones felt quite dark. I think it was darker than a lot of the sort of previous stuff. In moments, not as a without not being a sort of broad generalization, was that something that was filmed, or was that something that sort of developed into the post? Because if I look at something like that, there's obviously there's a lot of light there. So at which point are things sort of toned and sort of set in? Is that sort of stuff captured?
No, while we were shooting, I mean, it was a very clear decision for episode 3 specifically to go dark, and that was something that we all decided very early on before we started shooting. I had enough light there. I mean, I was shot on a 4.5 at least, you know.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make it a bit easier on the focus pullers too, because that's a really tough. You know, we were shooting 4 cameras, a lot of it handheld. You know, you don't want to shoot it on wide open. You know, so there was a lot. I mean, I've never seen that much light in my whole life. There was a lot of light there, but the intention was always to go dark. So.
And is it about creating the illusion of darkness more than it actually being dark?
It's both the same to me. What do you mean?
As opposed to, is it lit in such a way, so for argument's sake, is it just a sort of single key from one side? Or is it a bunch of stuff at a much lower level?
No, it wasn't necessarily on a much lower level. I mean, you know, the LUT was what made it darker. You know, if you had looked at it without the LUT, you know, on a 4.5, it was perfectly. But it's not what we wanted.
Yeah. I think this is one of the clips.
Oh, that's a video.
Yeah. Just sort of talk us through what's.
I just love the running green screens. That's all. No, this is that moment in the beginning where oh no, actually I don't know where it is in the episode, but it's where he it's like a one shot where he runs away from the army, and then the horses come behind him, and then they throw a spear into his back.
And you mentioned the sort of the green screens in the back that were that was sort of moving. Is that were they moved to clear for the horses, or was there some stuff on the screens that were actually?
No, they were moved to block the horses initially in the shot, and then get out of the way for the horses.
I think that's the same. Yeah, that's the same clip for anyone who missed the moving screens initially. Dealing with some seagulls flying around at the same time, it seems. Yeah.
This is at Belfast Port.
Right.
So.
I mean, this is the thing I think that I find most fascinating about this kind of work is you watch the playback and you would have no idea where this was shot, whereas when you look at stuff like this, you're really sort of looking under its skirt and you're seeing all the sort of background and the bits of the port and things hanging in. I think it must be a really exciting world to be in. And how hard is it for you when you're shooting something like that to imagine you sort of got an image in your mind of what the final thing is going to look like? Are you able to sort of tune out
totally
the rest of the stuff?
I don't see anything else. Yeah. I think everybody works differently, but for me, that's why I don't see the surrounding at all.
Was this Justice League?
No, this is also Thrones. This is where the baddie gets blown off his ship, I think. It's just all, it's all lighting effects, interactive lighting, because you've got firelight.
So how much control is there on set? I mean, because do you have, is stuff sort of controlled locally at fixtures? Are there sort of consoles that stuff is pre-programmed? How much of that is sort of managed? How much of that is done in a pre-production and sort of pre-visualized versus how much is done on the day when you're there?
The shot itself would be pre-visualized for something like this. But I like to make things up on the day, so I like to change things around. So I never use any preset things. So I mean, it's all of this is controlled on a desk and by a desktop. But this is a combination of LED. There's probably an LED softbox. There's some LEDs around the floor. there's 20 or maybe Wendy's, quarter Wendy's, because I like the the Wendy effect for firelight, and then I've got real flame bars as well. So it's a combination of the special effects guys bringing up the flame bars at the same time, or on the right cue, and at the same time the lights go off. So it's a combination of all of that.
And is there?
But it's something. Sorry, it's something I would, I would do a rehearsal, and I would go like, okay, I want more real flame, and this needs to come on later, or less of this, so that's something I would definitely do on the day.
And is any of this sort of control stuff? Is there any sort of time code involved, or is it sort of by operators and by eye on cue as we're going through? Is any of it sort of synced?
No, this would all be synced. Okay. Because the shot, lasts a certain time. The shot's 9 seconds long, so you would, and the camera moves. So what we did is we attached a laser for something like this. I'm not sure whether it was this particular one, but we attach a laser to, I can't remember how we done it, but we gave the camera operator something to follow so they can exactly replicate that move. So it doesn't have to be done in motion control. So you can basically follow a certain, because obviously everything else is already being built in visual effects while we're shooting this.
Right.
So there needs to be a certain consistency.
So you say it's been built in visual effects. So in the prep for this, do you get a chance to see what VFX is creating as you're sort of planning this?
No, you would never look at it. They're not far enough ahead, but obviously, for example, in this shot, you see the flame of the dragon, and you see him sort of being thrown from the ship by the blast, and then at the end of the take, I think you see the dragon flying through the shot. So that dragon, they start that work on that dragon a long time before we finish shooting. So, I never look at that because it's in its very early stages. But they have to start that work so early to be able to finish it by the time it airs. They literally work up to the night before the show airs. It's the time is nuts. Yeah.
Feels like a bit of a high pressure
Yeah,
job.
It's pretty full on, yeah, for them. Yeah.
For someone who wants to come into the industry and do what you do, what would you say is what advice is there? What's a good route to take? What can they expect sort of coming into the industry now? Because obviously I'm sure things have changed over the past couple of years.
I always think that if you want to do something, you should just go and do it, Obviously, it's a very competitive industry, film and TV especially. You mean getting into cinematography or generally into...
Generally in film, but more into cinematography.
Personally, I would say that, I never had a clear plan of what I was going to do. I knew that I wanted to shoot stuff. I never expected myself to be shooting Game of Thrones or Justice League or anything like that. I never had a plan, a career plan or anything like this. I just always enjoyed doing what I'm doing. And lucky enough, I had breaks and have gotten to a certain stage in my career. But, like I said, I started off, I've done everything. I was in the art department early on. I was a runner. I was a spark, I worked in lighting, and then I became a trainee and a loader and so on. And for me, I think it's something that I think for me was very helpful because I think it's great to know what the other departments do because it's such a collaborative industry. So it's, for me, I think it gave me benefit because I understand what the art department goes through and the runners and all of that. And so I really enjoyed that time actually, and I really enjoyed having had that experience. So I think that is something that's very useful for anyone because a lot of people think they just become a DP. And there is people, obviously, which is great, but to me personally, I think to have the understanding of what else goes on around you is very helpful and good for yourself too. And then obviously it's, it's a choice between going to film school or maybe just starting to work, But that's a very personal thing. It's whether you like studying, whether you like the thought of film school. You don't have to go to film school to become successful. I got turned down by 2 film schools. Went to 3 different film schools. Eventually, 2 were terrible, 1 was good. The 2 terrible ones were the ones that were actually highly regarded,
right?
In the film world, but they weren't for me. And the one that actually gave you as a student the least support was the one that I enjoyed the most. So I think you just never know. You just have to go into it.
Great. We've had a question come in on the chat, but just let everyone know who's here. Feel free to wave at me if you have anything that you'd like to ask. Questions come in. Do you ever get any downtime on a shoot to explore the places you visit, except on toilet breaks, or is it just work, work, work?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you don't. You really don't. There's this great thinking that you go to exotic places and you sort of see stuff, but I'm doing commercials right now mainly because I just had a baby, my wife just had a baby, and so I just want to be at home. And so, but I've been, in the last 5 weeks, I've been to Estonia, Switzerland, and I just come back from Lisbon, and you just sort of end up working, and then you spend an hour on FaceTime, and then you go to bed, so you don't really see anything. So, but sure, when I was a bit younger and before I had a family, I think I probably,
Yeah.
But I probably saw the clubs or the bars more than the sites.
Fair enough. Brilliant. That brings us to the end of our chat. Thank you very much for joining us on Light Bytes. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's been really good chatting to you. And thank you for everyone who's joined us live and in person. And thank you very much everyone who's joined us online. So May the 5th is our next session. Hopefully join us there. Do keep an eye on the website, etcconnect.com/lightbytes, where we will put up more information about our next session. Thank you all for joining us. Fabian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.